I want to talk about Mom. No, not your mother and not my mother, and certainly not the relatively recent movie that came out not too long ago. No, I want to talk about Ma, which is this Japanese concept that Hayao Miyazaki, one of my favorite directors, things like Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, and things of that like, has essentially mastered, and what makes his movies so fantastic. So, Ma is a Japanese term, and it essentially means emptiness, stillness. And he employs this stillness within his movies to evoke emotion, to create a deeper psychological connection between the characters as well as the audience, right? And this is a recent term that I learned, thanks to Screencraft. They had a blog about this, so I've linked to that as well, so you can read the full, context of what they wrote up and so forth. But it's something that within me has always been inherent. In fact, it's one of my criticisms of Chris Nolan movies is that they're just so unrelenting, where everything's just go, 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 and there's no respite. I think that's important, I'm going to read a quote from Hayao Miyazaki. If you have nonstop action with no breathing space at all, it's just busyness. But if you take a moment, then the tension building in the film can grow into a wider dimension. If you just have constant tension at 80 degrees all the time, you just get numb. And I agree with that. It's, in fact, within my own movies, there's certain elements that I fought for, against, my producers and my collaborators, because they're like, take that out. It's not, a worthwhile plot element. It's like, it doesn't need to always be a plot element. It creates that connection, right? It's that emptiness. And, what's always great is when you're vindicated by your choices in that. And, I also credit a lot to my collaborator, John Comerford, because he always knew what I was going for. And so he said, listen, if you parse this other stuff away here and there, then it gives you room for those moments and it'll make them hit a lot more. And he was 100% on the money. Another sort of recent example of, a mom moment, let's say, is in Barbie. And no, I won't spoil it too much, but there is this one scene that Greta Gerwig herself, the director, really fought for because, they said it's a non-scene. And it's the scene with Margot Robbie as stereotypical Barbie with this elder woman. And it's just such a beautiful scene because Margot Robbie recognizes the beauty in someone who's older and just is able to connect and have a real human moment, right? Even though she is literally Barbie, right? And that's a scene that doesn't move the plot forward, and so people wanted to really cut it, but Greta Gerwig really put her foot down and said, no, it stays in. And that's one of the highlights for many, many people of the movie, that scene in particular. And so just imagine had they cut it, right? That is a pure example of it doesn't have to be 100% plot driven, but it creates that moment, right? That is cinema. As Roger Ebert describes of Hayao Miyazaki, I'm going to read another quote. Instead of every moment being dictated by the story, sometimes people will just sit for a moment, or they will sigh, or look in a running stream, or do something extra, not to advance the story, but only to give the sense of time and place and who they are. That's what we're talking about. You need those moments. And, conversely, I mentioned Barbie, but as I, hinted at, Nolan has the sense that it's just always go, go, go. And Oppenheimer is this 3-hour talking movie, and it's, even the moments where we get inside Oppenheimer's, psyche, literally like the visions that he's seeing, they're so quick. They're like almost like flash cuts, right? And in today's day and age, when editing has become so fast paced and we become used to cinematic language, we just try to okay, they'll get it. And I think, it's important for filmmakers and storytellers to have that moment of brevity of like, okay, let's just let people settle in. Another recent example is in Mission Impossible, the recent one, 7, so well done overall. There's a couple of major, and I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm just going to talk about it from the macro perspective, but there's a couple of major beats that affect, the various characters. And, they might reflect upon it for 10 seconds within the movie. And that might feel like a long time and enough. And it's like, okay, they'll get it. And it's just kind of glossed over. And so we lose that human connection, right? And with Miyazaki in particular, Spirited Away, one of his, most famous movies, one of the mom moments is when the main character, Chihiro, who's a 10-year-old girl, she's riding this train with a couple other characters. And that's it. That's the scene. Nothing's really happening, but it's a story about her finding her place in this world. And, that's a very reflective period of how large the world really is all around her. And, you're able to have that connection because it's just her riding on a train. The music is very subdued. It's much more about the nature, the train tracks, the passing world, and so forth, right? And the stillness and the quietness. So, yeah, I think this is an important thing. It's something that I inherently felt, but it's always great to have a word to really encompass that, right? And be able to talk about it in a more articulate way than this guttural feeling of like, oh, we need X, Y, and Z, right? And so that's why I love this article from Screen Rant, and I appreciate them sharing it. And I just wanted to kind of, summarize it, but also add my 2 cents into it, and based on my experience and so forth, give a couple of examples, so that way, you can benefit from it. But I have linked to the source itself, so you can check that out if you'd like for further reading. And you know what? Definitely, if you haven't ever checked out Hayao Miyazaki's movies, my personal favorite is Princess Mononoke, but there's so many wonderful ones, so definitely go check them out if you haven't, because they're really wonderful, and you'll see what I'm talking about in terms of the mom moments. You'll recognize them, and you'll feel them. That's what's so wonderful about it. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. I truly do appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.